I know we always love a flat front elasticated back waistband, and believe it or not, there are a lot of ways to sew them. This is a fun episode with 5 ways that are going to help you sew these types of waistbands. You can pick and choose your favorite. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and today I have an actual sewing video for you. I have a technique video. I like compiling different types of techniques for the same result, because then you can just get a wide variety of ways that the same thing can be done. And it's not the same, but the effect will basically be the same in the end. The goal is to have a flat front and elasticated back waistband. And you can't just add this to any pattern. This has to be a pattern that is designed for this. Either a skirt or pants or shorts have been designed with more ease on the back. So it's not like you can just take a regular pattern and do this and call it a day. You do need to have that excess ease drafted into the pattern. But if you are working with a pattern that is designed like this, then your options are pretty much endless in the way that you sew this waistband. And some I think are more complicated than others. So there's always different ways to get to the same result. And after sewing so many of them, I do have my preferences. What all of these have in common is that the front waistband, which is going to stay flat, is always interfaced. This front waistband can either be a rectangle or it can be composed of 2 pieces because it's a curved waistband on the front. If your front waistband is curved and has those 2 pieces, you have the extra step of sewing them on the top, understitching, clipping seam allowances, all of that, but then you end up with a front waistband that's sort of curved, and then the back waistband is always a rectangle and it's never interfaced. So those are common features you'll see on all of these. The way I calculate the length of the elastic I'm going to use at the back is by measuring the front waistband. Sometimes it'll reach the side seams and it'll be sort of half of the measurement of the whole waistband, and other times it will have different measurements. This one, for example, doesn't go across the whole front, so the back waistband is actually longer than the front waistband. But that doesn't matter. I always just measure this because this is not going to change. It's not going to be elasticated. I measure my waist and check what the difference is. If my waist was 34 inches, for example, and this measured 15 inches, so I would take my 34 minus the 15, I would get 19 left, but I would make that a little smaller, maybe 17 and a half, 17, 1.5 to 2 inches smaller than the rest of what I need, and that's the elastic I would use. So just always measure your front waistband. That's not going to change. Measure your waist, check out what the difference is, and then make it a tiny bit smaller, and that'll usually work for any waistband. Let's get my least favorite method out of the way, and this one basically involves sewing the front and the back separately. So you would get your legs and sew the crotch, both for the front and the back, and then you would sew the waistbands on separately and then unite them. It can be easier in some ways and also harder in other ways. I do find it a little bulky in the way that the waistbands join in the end. So let's get it out of the way. It's just not my favorite, and there are easier ways to do it. So let's see. This is the outer waistband from the main fabric, the one that's interfaced. When you look at these, the bottom that's longer, that is what actually goes sewn onto the pants, and that is the top of the waistband. This is the inner waistband. I have another linen, just contrasting print that will be inside. No one will see that. I'm going to take the bottom edge of my inner waistband, the one that's not interfaced, and do a guide stitch there so we can go ahead and press this in like that. Continuing with guide stitches, I'm going to do the same with the back waistband. This one is just a rectangle, it's not curved, so you can choose either of the long ends, it doesn't really matter. I'm also going to do a guide stitch and fold that in like that to have that ready for later. I've been to the iron with my back waistband and my inner front waistband and press these in. I'm going to trim this to about half of this. That's enough. You don't really need more fabric in there. And I'm going to do that with this one and all this curved area as well. So we're going to work on the front waistband first. Take your inner waistband, the one that's not interfaced, and put it on the table right sides up. Now take your outer waistband, the one that's interfaced, and put it on top. As usual, I want to sew with the interface side on the top where the presser foot is, and the non-interface side at the bottom with the feed dogs. After sewing both the outer and the inner waistbands together, I am trimming that seam allowance. After trimming that, I'm doing some snips. Every inch or so, it is a curve and it will relieve the tension. Now we're going to open this up and understitch, pushing the seam allowance underneath the inner waistband, this one, but we're not going to understitch from the very edge. We're going to start about an inch in, and we do need to leave this area free because of the way we are going to attach the back waistband later. So don't start from the very edge, just a little further, and the same end before the waistband finishes. And as usual, I have my presser foot here ready to give me a hand. Here I'm not going to go to the very end. Okay, so we have our front waistband ready, and now we are going to take our front. We're going to match the outer waistband to the pants right sides together. We are sewing this waistband on traditionally, so we're just going to match the center front of this pin here to the center front where the seam is, and then pin along up to the edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this along the curve, and then we're going to sew. After sewing it, I'm also trimming down the seam allowance to half. There's quite a few layers, especially in the pocket area, so all the fabric that doesn't need to be there can definitely be trimmed away. Now that we've sewn the waistband on and we've trimmed the seam allowance, we can go ahead and press the seam allowance up like this towards the waistband. Later in the process, this is going to come and cover the seam on the inside. You can see this is the wrong side of the pants, and that's how it's going to look. It's going to look pretty. The understitching there is going to keep the inner waistband inside and it won't be seen from the outside. So I'll go ahead and press this and leave this aside so we can work on the back. This is not finalized until later on. So at this stage, this is all we do with the front waistband. Now we've got our back waistband out again, and I'm also going to fold this in half and put a pin at the center back here. Now we're going to work on the edge that's raw, not the edge that's been folded in previously. So remember, we'd folded that. And now to attach the back waistband to the back of the pants, I am going to do this one on the reverse because you can do this for the back waistband. You can see they're done separately, and for this one, this is definitely going to be easier. So you're basically placing right side of the waistband to the wrong side of the pants. It's so much easier to top stitch afterwards doing it this way than doing it traditionally. So we'll just pin this along, and you can see the edge matches over here perfectly. That's why it was super important to stabilize that waist. Just go ahead and pin and also sew this together. Okay, there we go. The same way I'm doing everywhere. I'm trimming these seam allowances down. And the same as I did with the front waistband, I'm going to head over to the iron and press the seam allowance up towards the waistband. But to make it different from the front, we can actually finish the whole back waistband now, whereas the front, we had just done it partially. Because this is more straight than curved at the back, I'm not going to need to snip into the seam allowance. This is the back. You can see this is the right side of the fabric. Here we have the seam pressed up towards the waistband. And because we've sewn it on the reverse, now I can just bring this, fold, meet the seam, and now top stitch. I find it so much easier because I know what I see. I'm sewing from the right side of the fabric. This is the visible side of the pants, and I don't need to worry about not catching anything on the back because that seam has already been sewn. So I'm just gonna take my time and cover that seam, pin it, and then hand baste it, and we'll just sew all the way across with the presser foot sewing on the edge, and then we're gonna have our space to put our elastic in and gather the back. Into the iron, and I've pressed it. This is 2 inches here, 5 centimeters. So I have this wide elastic. It's gonna fit nice and snug. Now if you don't have elastic that's 2 inches, you can use probably 2 elastics that are 3/4 and sew through the middle to create 2 casings, and then you would thread one and then the other, and that's another alternative if you don't have this type of elastic. But thankfully I do, so I just have to thread this through. I just measure half of my waist, take that half measurement and just take away 1.5 inches, and that's sort of like a standard that I use for the back elastic. I find that fits me well, whatever pattern I'm using that has this type of waistband. So half of my waist minus 1.5 inches, and that's it. We have the waistband open on both extremes, so it's just a matter of threading it through. I use a huge safety pin for this. Look, this elastic is so good, like it's non-roll, it's really thick and sturdy. It's not the type that's going to flop over inside. Okay, so here you can see the elastic threaded through. You can see the slight gathering right here. Now I thought I was filming when I sewed this down, but I wasn't, so I lost that footage. But it's just a basting stitch holding the elastic in place on both this side and the other side. So this is all we do with the back at this point. Look, my elastic is really firm. It's not going to roll or fold. So I think leaving it like this is okay. But if I was working with a different type of elastic that was a little bendier or not so firm, I would definitely go stretching this and top stitching at least once through the middle to keep that elastic in place. So have a look at your elastic, see if you need to top stitch, and do it at this point before we attach the front waistband. Okay, we've just sewn the inseam and top stitched that, but we still have the side seams dangling and this front waistband like this. So put your pants on the table like this, wrong sides up, with the back on the top and the front on the bottom. And now what we need to do on the side here is take this back waistband and sort of put it in between these. So just where the seam meets, you're going to put the top of the back waistband and just bring this over and cover it. So this is why I didn't want to understitch all the way. I wanted that to be free right there. Make sure the seam allowance on the front is going up, and this one is going up also, and in between you're going to have the back waistband. So I'm just going to pin that in place, and then I'm going to continue pinning all the way down the side seam, because it will be one continuous stitch all the way down to the bottom. And then on this side also, you just tuck this back waistband in between, bring this inner waistband over, wrapping it around, and we're also going to pin and sew. Let me show you what I'm doing here. I don't want all these gathers to go right up there, because this is going to be enclosed within the 2 layers of the waistband and it could get bulky. So what I did was just push the fabric away and tried to get this area to be as neat, as flat as possible, and I put 2 pins to hold that in place. I did the same thing over here, and so having this as flat as possible, I'm going to get this waistband from the front and sandwich the back inside. So it's going to be as flat and as neat, and there's not going to be any gathers in there when you want to sew that together. Okay, so both sides have been pinned, this area, and including the whole side seam down to the hem. In this area there is a lot of bulk, there's elastic, there's quite a few layers, so I'm going to lengthen my stitch length in this point to about 3.5. When I get to just the simple 2 layers, I will just reduce it again to the 3 that I'm using. Okay, so here's one side sewn, and now we can flip this. I'm gonna just fold that away, and now you can see that the inner waistband is still loose. We still need to fix all the inner waistband in place. That's how it looks from the other side. Before finishing this waistband, of course, we need to finish the edges here with the serger. I'll just repeat and sew this other side seam, and then we're gonna fix the inner waistband in place. I'm at the ironing board with my little tailor's ironing board doing the side seams. There are 2 things I don't like about this technique, although it does look super neat. One of them is the bulk here. I just find it super bulky. The other thing, that there's no other way to press the seam allowance than to the front leg. Traditionally for pants you press it to the back, and especially with pockets like this, you know, when you have all the bulk of the pocket, you do want to press it to the back because it's flatter in this area. But with this, you get all the bulk of having to press it to the front, because you just can't press the seam to the back with this technique, because the seam is in there, tucked in, coming towards the front. There's no other way. Now we just need to finish the waistband. It's still open like this, and remember, we've sewn it traditionally, so the seam that we did is on the front when we did these right sides together, so the open area is at the back. There's no other way. You can't do this in the reverse because of this technique, so it has to be done like this. So that means you really have to be careful when you top stitch that you do catch the layer that's at the back. Pin and hand base to make sure whatever I'm going to sew there is going to be catching this. Here is the front waistband pasted on. You can see where I'm going to sew on the edge, catching the inner waistband. That was the one that was loose, that's covering the seam. there is a stitch, and let's check the other side, make sure everything has been caught. So far so good. Everything on the inside was caught. There's no area that wasn't, so that is good. Successful hand basting, highly recommend. The flat front waistband, so comfortable to wear. Here you can see the elasticated feature on the back, which gives you the comfort. The waistband at the front is flat, so you can see there's no gathers, no elastic there. It is curved. It does reach my natural waist, super comfy. That's the way I like to wear my pants. At the back, the waistband is elasticated, so it's totally separate. You saw how I sewed that. Flat front, elasticated back is gold because you don't get the extra bulk at the tummy with the gathers. The next method is one of my favorites, and it's basically sewing your pants as usual, one leg, the other leg, putting one inside the other, all of that, and then doing the waistband in the end. You get a waistband that's complete. You have the front one and the back one sewn together, sewn onto the pants, and the very last step is threading the elastic. I like to do this in the reverse, where I sew the waistband to the inside of the pants and flip the waistband out, and I think it's the easiest way to do it. So let's see. This is the back waistband. I have folded one edge in the same way. I have already trimmed that seam allowance down. We'll put that aside. Now the slight difference here with the front is that instead of folding in the inner waistband like that, I did that with the outer waistband because we're going to sew the whole thing in the reverse. So I did the guide stitch on the bottom edge of the outer waistband, the one that's interfaced, the one that I'm using the main fabric for. I'm also using a contrast for the inner waistband here. We're still going to sew these right sides together. So here are the both front waistbands sewn together. I'm also going to trim this and do the snips when needed because it is a curve and understitch. So up to here, as you can see, the only difference is that the outer waistband is the one that has the fold done already. In the other one, it was the inner waistband. And now we understitch. In the same way, we're going to push the seam allowance underneath the inner waistband here. And I'm also going to leave a little bit here without understitching. Now this is where it gets very different. I'm going to now take my back waistband and I'm going to place this right sides together with this, matching the folded edge here with the folded edge here and the raw edge with the raw edge. So I'm just going to extend it. They will have the same length, as you can see. They match perfectly, and we're just going to sew this together here and the same on this other side. So we're just going to have a continuous waistband. I find this method a lot easier. Okay, so now I'm going to head to the iron and press the seam allowance open like this, and then press this like that, so that I have a whole waistband ready to be sewn onto the pants all on the round. Okay, so here is the waistband. It looks a little weird, but will make sense in a second. This is the inner waistband from the front, and I've got a pin right in the center front. I've also put a pin in the center back, and I've got a waistband on the round, seams on the sides right there. Everything's gonna make sense in a second, so let's just leave that there. Have your pants wrong sides up, and now we're gonna put the waistband on top like this, and slide the pants inside so that the waistband is right side to wrong side of the pants there. Match the center fronts here, match the side seams, the other side seam, and then just pin it all on the round. And we're going to sew this at the back. We match these pins here at the center and we keep pinning around. This is much easier than the other method, and you'll see here on the side it will be much more comfortable. So after pinning everything, making sure the raw edges are together, we're sewing this on the round. It's just a really long seam, that's all. I'm also going to trim the seam allowance down, head to the iron and press the seam allowance up towards the waistband so that doesn't change. Okay, I've turned the pants so that the fabric is right sides out, and you can see the waistband is sewn on like this. Now when we fold this folded edge that we've done previously is going to cover the seam, and we can top stitch from the right side of the pants, and we can do this the whole way around in one go, with exception to small spaces we're going to leave in the side seam so we can thread the elastic at the back, because that still needs to happen. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did with the other one, make sure that fold covers the seam a little bit, and I'm just going to quickly hand baste this down, so then it's just top stitching. This is the back part of the waistband, that's where we need to put the elastic through. So I want to start threading it from this side. So where that seam is, I'm just going to leave that gap open for a little bit, like 1.5 inches. I'll also stop about 1.5 inches before this seam, leave a gap, and then sew from here onwards onto the front. This is the gap that I'm going to have at the back. I'm going to remove the basting stitches. This is the seam, that's the front waistband, this is the back. Here is the opening that I've left. Maybe it should have been a little bit bigger, we'll see. So this is a little finicky, but I still find it easier this way. So I'm managing to pull it through. Once I've got this almost through, I want the elastic to hang over to the front by about 3/8. Okay, now the elastic is inside. I'm just going to push it towards the front waistband a little bit. There, I can touch it. Okay, I've fiddled with it. I've got some pins holding it in place, and I think it's easier to deal with this side first before continuing to push the elastic through the other side. So I'm gonna sew right in the middle of that seam and then close off that little bit right. So that side is done, it's all secure, it's fixed in there, and I've just pushed it along until I've got the elastic coming out of this other side. I'm gonna get rid of this safety pin right now and just fiddle with this elastic in there until I can do the same thing I've done on the other side. Have this elastic be inside and coming forward towards the front by a little bit. There we go, I can touch the elastic is right there, and I'll basically do the same thing here. Sew it down and then close the little gap, and that's it. Okay, so there's the elasticated back. This is super flat, really nice to wear on the skin in comparison to the other one where it was really bulky. This allows you to press the seam of the sides towards the back and have less bulk here at the pockets. And overall, I think it's easier. I think it takes a lot less time to do, but it's up to you. I've shown you both ways. You can choose what you want to try. I'm gonna stretch this as I top stitch it down. As I top stitch, you can see my hands are extended, but I'm not actually pushing anything through the feed dogs. I'm just keeping the elastic extended and the waistband just completely straight. I just let the feed dogs push along the fabric. I'm not pushing anything along. I'll probably have to do at least 3 rows here, one in the middle, then divide that again, and then divide that again. I'll never tuck in, but I'm tucking in so you can see the waistband details, the flat front, elasticated back. I did top stitch the back where the elastic is because my elastic was a little floppy. Flat front waistband, as you can see, I did some decorative stitching with my machine. It's elasticated at the back, as you can see, that makes them pull on. I've got my front flat waistband there that's curved with the print and elasticated back. Super comfy, not bulky at all. Tucking in my top, you can see the flat front waistband. It is curved, and you can see the slight gathering there with the elasticated feature. Straight waistband on the back. The next one is a little bit different, and it's going to work if your fabric is a little bulkier, if you're working with a heavier woven or a heavier knit. It's still going to give you the flat front, elasticated back, but it's just sewn in a different way where the final stitch is just done through less layers. You use a little stitch in the ditch situation. It's super, super easy, and it'll give you a pretty comfortable fit with less bulk, and also less bulk while you're sewing with the same effect as all the others. So let's see. This is another way to sew the flat front elasticated back waistband, and I would use this if I was using a heavy woven or a heavy knit. Same technique. This is a heavy knit fabric. I have my front interfaced, my back isn't, and I'm just going to join them together right here on these short ends, both sides, so that I end up with a round waistband. What I'm doing here is what I do with knit or woven. It would be exactly the same thing, and I join these using the sewing machine with a straight stitch. There we go. I'm going to choose any of the long ends, it doesn't matter which one, and I'm going to serge it. So I'm just going to head over there and clean up the edge. I'm going to leave the other end raw. Here we have the waistline of the garment. It could be a skirt or pants, anything. I've marked with pins at the center of the waist right there. And then I've got my waistband. I've just serged the edge. I want to take the raw edge, put the garment inside, match them up right sides together, matching up the center areas here, and whatever reference points you have in the garment. This waistband is going to match the top of the garment's waistline 1 to 1 perfectly. So it's not going to be smaller, you're not going to need to stretch anything, it'll all fit perfectly. And I'll just take my time to pin all around. And remember, this is right sides together. Some of the methods I use, I do it the other way around, where I place the waistband inside the garment to the wrong side and then flip it over. But in this case, I will be flipping it over to the back. Here is the waistband pinned all along the top edge of the garment, and everything matches 1 to 1. It's all good. Now I'm going to sew it together, in this case using a 3/8 seam allowance, and I'll be using a narrow zigzag for that. Also called a shallow zigzag. It almost looks like a straight stitch, but it'll give you a little bit of stretch and give. If I was doing this technique with a woven, I'd just use a straight stitch. What I want to do now is extend this. I'm going to go to the iron and press the seam allowance up towards the waistband, and then I'm going to bring the serged edge over, and it's just going to cover the seam, and I'm going to pin that all the way along. Basically, we're going to stitch in the ditch right here, and we're going to be catching the waistband on the other side. When we sew into that seam, we're going to have about 3/8 of the waistband right there, and that's how we're basically going to be sewing only through 2 layers, the skirt layer and the waistband on the back. And we're not going to be going through 3 or 4 layers, which other waistband techniques would have. And it's just more difficult to manage and just bulkier to wear in general with a fabric that's heavier like this. So I'm just going to go to the iron, press everything, press this over, knead it and all up, and then I'll be back to stitch right there in the ditch all the way around. Now remember, we have an elasticated area. So this is the front that's not going to be elasticated. So on this area, I'm going to leave a gap from my stitch in the ditch, so I have a space to thread my elastic through the back. I've got a pin right where I'm going to sew the seam, so right in the ditch, and you can see that I'm catching waistband on the other side. I went all the way around and pinned it, and now I'm just going to sew right in there. I'm going to leave my shallow zigzag because this is a knit. If it was a woven, I'd use a straight stitch, and I don't use a stitch in the ditch foot. I just use my regular presser foot, and I just go carefully sewing right into that seam there all the way around. I'm going to leave a gap on both sides so I can put my elastic through. Here is the inside of the garment. This is the front waistband here, and this is the back, and here is my opening right through there. So I'm going to thread my elastic through until I get all the elastic in, and I'm going to push the elastic towards the front area of the waistband just a little, and then I'll be sewing in that seam to hold it in place. You've seen me do this with all the techniques, so at this point the technique is the same for all of them. I thread the elastic and stitch them down. All that was new was the way to sew it with the stitch in the ditch. And once I've got the elastic in, I'm just going to go back in there and just sew the edge that hasn't been sewn on both sides, and everything will be finished. Got my elastic in there and held with a pin in place, and I'm just going to close up the gap on this side, stitching in the ditch. Here's the front waistband, this is the back waistband, and the elastic is just right there, just over towards the front waistband a little, and now I'm just going to stitch in this stitch, hold it in place. Can't even see that seam basically, it's all closed up, and now I still need to keep pushing the elastic through to the other side. Once I get to the other side, I'll just repeat and finish off the same thing. And then I don't want to leave my elastic just loose like that. I'll be stretching it and doing some top stitching there like you've seen on the other waistbands. That will be the same. The next one you might not have seen. I know I have seen these instructions in some big four patterns. And in this case, you don't use a wide elastic to thread through. You use 3 small elastics that you thread through channels. And you sort of construct the waistband separately from the pants and then sew it on. So let's see this one. For this type of waistband, we have a front that's not elasticated, it'll be flat. This is one that's interfaced. It's always a good idea to interface this to keep the structure. So the method on this one is to sew channels here. Once you have the channel sewn, you thread elastic. So this elastic is 3/8 of an inch. So the channels here are going to be 1/2 an inch just to give you wiggle space to put your elastic through. So you would be threading the elastic from one side to the other, and then this would already be gathered, and then we join it to the front waistband. We reinforce when we start and when we stop. From the fold here, I'm just going to measure 1/2 an inch on my metal plate. If you want, you can draw this onto your fabric if that's easier. The next channel is 1/2 an inch from that one this way, but I know I have to sew 2 more rows. So I think it'll be easier for me to just measure an inch from this one. So that is my inch right there. And then from the raw edge, measure how much I have here, 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm gonna do, just to make it easier, is flip this, have the raw edge here, and measure 3/4 of an inch from here onwards, and then I'm going to have 1 row, and then I can just sew in the middle and I'll get my 3 rows. That's how I find it easier. Another way that you could do it is marking your 3 lines with a friction pen. Whatever works, you just need 3 rows of stitching. Now I'm going to sew between these and I'll have my 3 rows. I'm using a large safety pin, and now I'm just going to pull these through one by one. So I have my 3/8 elastic that should fit nice and snug in this 1/2 an inch channel. You never want to make your channel the same size as your elastic, or else it'll be the snuggest fit ever. Always try to make sure your elastic doesn't twist inside, so I'm always touching and checking. Once you get to the other side and your safety pin pokes out, I'm going to just put a pin to secure that. And then I'm just going to fiddle with the rest of the elastic here. Now, when I calculated my elastic, I did calculate it to end up a little longer, because this always happens. Like, I'm never able to get the rest right in there. It just gets stuck on the fabric. So that is a practical thing that's going to happen sometimes when you do channels like this. So that's one done. And now we just need to repeat again. So take my elastic and thread through the second channel, then the third one. Then in the end, I'm just going to have a bunch of pins, and I'm just going to sew that so that it fixes the elastic in place. Super easy, as you can see. All of them are through. When you push out the safety pin from here, you can get right to the edge. Over here, I left that little bit hanging off. This one that I had a little bit extra, I was able to push it in a little bit more. You can see it's all done here. These are all just secured with pins. I'm just going to do a stitch close to the edge, smaller than the 3/8 seam allowance on both sides, and that will secure the elastics in place. Our back waistband is done, and now we have our front. And the way that we unite this is super easy. All we have to do is take our waistband and align it here, the raw edge to one raw edge, and then bring this and cover it so that we're sandwiching the back waistband in between the fold there. So it's very, very easy, just aligning all the raw edges. That's one side, and then on the other side, making sure this stays neat and doesn't twist anyway, we take the raw edge, align it to the raw edge over here, right on the edge, and bring this forward and pin it in place. And we're going to do these 2 little seams, and then when we flip the waistband, you're going to see that this back waistband is coming from inside the front waistband. And then we're going to have a completed round waistband that we can sew onto the shorts or the pants or the skirt. Both little seams there. Because there are quite a few layers here, I'm just lengthening my stitch length to 3.5. Both seams are done, and now we flip and we have the back waistband enclosed. So now we have our waistband all ready, and we can sew this onto the pants. Now on the section where it'll be flat, you won't be stretching the waistband obviously, but from here onwards we'll need to be stretching this out to sew it onto the top of the pants, because this will be 1-to-1 with the pants. But this has already been elasticized. Here is the waist of my garment. Put the garment inside the waistband. These are right sides together, and this is the flat part of the waistband. Now in this particular pattern, the flat section will meet the start of the slant pocket opening, but in your pattern it might go over to the side seam, so it doesn't really matter, the technique is the same. Just make sure you're matching your references where they need to go. Then over here we have this little mark on the pattern, and this is the one that's going to match the side seam right there. You can see if I stretch this elasticated area, my little pin is going to match right there. So that is my next reference point that I want to match. And then for the rest of the back, I'm just going to find the center here, match it up with the center. And when we stretch the waistband, you can see it's going to match the waist of the garment perfectly. We're just going to need to stretch this as we sew to sew it all on the round. Here it's just 1-to-1, no need to stretch anything. Okay, and now on the back section I have a ton of pins matching up the raw edges, but I have to stretch this like that. You'll get a little bit of a curve. Just the waistband does match the top of the garment at the waistline. Okay, so everything's sewn. Now all we need to do is serge the edge, and then the waistband is done. And that's how it looks on the back, elasticated. But then in this case, from the pocket, we have the front waistband that's flat. In other patterns, if you want to use the same technique, your waistband will just reach the side seam right here. So it doesn't matter really up to where it goes, but the technique is the same, the 3 channels, the small elastic in each one, and closing the back waistband between these, it would be the same thing. In a couple of days, there will be a new pattern released at Love Notions called Tinley. It's got several versions. It's got a full skirt, it's got a full short that looks like a skirt, you have a straight skirt and straight shorts. And the Tinley uses the method that you just saw with the 3 channels and the 3/8 elastic there. So what you saw there is that technique from the shorts. But if you have another pattern and you want to try that technique, you are just able to adapt your pattern pieces and do it like that if you think that is easy. What I find easy about that technique is that you don't have to be stretching the elastic in the end to top stitch it, which is fiddly, and it's like a little bit cumbersome with all the other methods where the top stitching of the elastic is sort of the last step. In this case, it's super neat because you've done your channels beforehand, you've done your elastic beforehand, so in that way it could be easier. So it's just another way. It looks very similar to all the others, and it'll get you a really nice result. So that is one of the ways you can sew the flat front elasticated back. Just a little different with channels. You don't need white elastic. And then the last way, I think, is one of my favorites, and it's doing the flat front with the fabric that you're using, but then at the back, instead of using your main fabric, you just use a knit fabric, and at the back it's sort of like a half yoga waistband, no elastic involved. You just need a knit with good recovery, at least 10% spandex, a heavier cotton lycra, and athletic knit are going to work really well. And it's so comfortable. It's very, very comfortable. So let me just show you how that's done. These are the 2 front waistbands. I interfaced them both because it's a really lightweight rayon, so might as well. If it was a heavier fabric, then I would just interface the outer waistband. You can see it's curved. So I've sewn the top edge together. You can see it has this angle going out. So the longer edge is the bottom, the shorter edge is the top, and it's just been sewn together with 3/8. It is a little bit curved, so I am going to do some snips here before understitching this. In my case, these are exactly the same, like there's no preference here, so I'll just choose any of these layers to be the outer waistband. I'm just going to choose this one here on my right hand, and I'm going to push the seam allowance towards the inner waistband, the one that's going to go on the left hand. Those are just my choices, and that's how I'm going to understitch so that this inner layer stays inside. So there we can see the understitching when this waistband is nice and pressed. That understitching is going to keep the inner layer inside. For now, I'm just going to put this here on the table. I'm going to scrunch it up so it fits the camera frame. And now we just need to sew the knit waistband that I cut out. It's like a half a yoga waistband. I'm gonna place these right sides together here at these short ends. I show you how I calculated this to match this exactly right here. So I'm gonna sew these together with a narrow zigzag. So when I've sewn these two edges together, I'm gonna end up with the waistband on the round. The front waistband is going to be the one made in woven, same rayon I'm using for the pants, and then at the back I'm going to have a yoga waistband. At the back it's going to be half a yoga waistband made out of cotton spandex. So this will replace the original waistband that these pants have that's made in woven with an elastic inside. So I'm just going to get these layers sewn. I've been to the iron and just pressed the waistband in half so that we have our wrong sides together. Remember, the front one has a seam, the back one doesn't, it's just a fold like that. And now I've put pins in the center front and the center back, and now I just have to match it up to the pants. Now with the back that's made with a knit, I'm gonna have to stretch this to match the back like this, and that'll bring it in instead of having a longer waistband with elastic inside. Here's the top of the pants. What you're seeing here is the front, and on this section the waistband just goes on 1-to-1, matches, and the yoga waistband matches the side seams right here. But then at the back I've divided the back waist into 4, and you can see I've got them pinned there. There's an excess of the woven fabric compared to the knit, so I'm going to stretch this when I sew them together, and that is going to bring it all in. On this section where I'm sewing the knit waistband area, I'm using a zigzag stitch, very narrow one. Now that I've reached where I'm going to start the woven, I'm going to swap my stitch to just a regular straight stitch. See how at the back it looks like it's gathered, but it's actually not. It was just me pulling on the knit waistband to match this. You can see there's no gathers actually. It's just the knit waistband bringing it in. Then when you press it, you can barely tell those gathers are there, but this is small enough to hold your pants up and be super comfy. So now that that's sewn, just serge the edge and that's it. Here up closer you can see the flat front waistband that's curved, and then at the back there's a yoga waistband that's only partial and it's at the back. Makes these pull on super easy. The only method I really don't enjoy is the first method that you saw. All the others are perfectly fine. They're just adaptable for different types of fabric. Method number 2 I think is really easy. But if I was working with a really heavy fabric, I don't want all those folds in the waistband. So then I would use method number 3 instead, which had the stitch in the ditch. You know, maybe I ran out of white elastic and I just have small elastic in my stash. Then I would use the one with the channels. I think the method with the channels is easier to achieve with a woven fabric, not that easy to work with a knit. I think the channels, the elastic could get stuck in there a little bit, but it's just a new way that you can try out. And the flat front yoga back, that is just amazing. It's very comfortable and I like that one as well. So I hope this was useful, gave you a lot of options. Have a try. Maybe you've tried one of these methods already, and be on the lookout for the release of the Tinley in just a few days. I'll have 4 versions to share. The stitch in the ditch method with the white and black fabric, that's one of them, sneak peek, and the stripy version you saw, another sneak peek. I've got others to share as well. Make sure you subscribe, tap on your notifications so you never miss all the sewing content here on this channel. I'll see you again very soon. Bye.